Hey, happy Monday, everybody. And I thought I would just hop on here and I decided what I was going to talk about earlier. And I'm thinking, so how do we uh, step out of shame? And there's a couple theories around this. One of the main ones has been developed by Dr. Brene Brown, and she talks about shame resilience theory. And then there's also been other ways that have been created by Pete Walker, who talks about shame reduction. And so, basically how this is done is being able to recognize when we're in shame and to take it from an internalized experience and externalizing it. So versus me shutting down and not talking about it, which only creates more shame, we want to externalize it and process it, whether it's through talking to somebody. And basically what Brene Brown says in her shame resilience theory is by becoming vulnerable, we can build more empathy and compassion for ourselves and other people and overall increase bonding. Emotional intelligence, that's basically what I mean by bonding. And who doesn't want more of that, So, not as simple though, because even when we can sometimes think about sharing, something we feel shame about, and it can be anything. It can be our finances or how we feel neglected in our relationships, or like how we're not achieving what we want to achieve in life. I mean, anyone can have shame about really anything. And so when it comes to talking about it, we can start thinking or anticipating, like, what is this other person going to think about us? And we can, it can even be paired with what Pete Walker calls the internal critic. So the critic can start coming in and criticizing you and basically judging you for wanting to bring these things up. So a way to kind of step away from that or step out of that or observe it is to acknowledge that maybe you're feeling shame around it and encourage yourself that it's okay. It's okay to feel that way. And usually you want to identify where it's coming from, because that can help build more of a cohesive blueprint. I feel like in my own personal work and helping others, when we're able to understand where we learned this emotional blueprint from, or this emotional pattern that lives inside of our bodies, it makes more sense and it's more authentic. So shame resilience also talks about this. The more we can step into our authenticity, the more empathy we'll have, and the more we'll be likely to externalize shame rather than internalize it. And so what I mean by that is, instead of being really cerebral about it, being like, okay, how can I change the way I think? How do I say this? It's a more cohesive narrative. So understanding, like, I'm shaming myself because this is what I learned in my family of origin, or because this is what society told me. These are rules that I took on that I don't really believe in, but I did anyway. Rather than thinking, let me just shift this thought, and not really having an origin of it. I think getting down to the root of what's happening really helps us build that authentic narrative and really gets us to own our stories. So just my personal opinion. So the first thing to recognize is just when you're in shame. And I think for a long time, I didn't even realize what that experience was like. But it is pretty visceral and physical. And it's almost like it involves fight or flight oftentimes, if it feels really intense, but not always. So it just depends on who you are, and you'll kind of know because you start to just feel bad for thinking or feeling anything. That's what John Bradshaw talks about, toxic shame. But that's how you'll know. You'll feel bad for having a need, or feel bad, or you'll think you're bad for having a need or a want or desire or request or preference. And so that is a indicator that somewhere along the lines in your life you were taught not to feel the way you want to feel, think the way you want to feel, And that's, and just kind of to make it a strengths-based kind of perspective and give you some hope, that is, what do I want to say? That is, I want to say that's good. That's a place to start. You know, someone told me one time, like, if there's no pain, there's no path to the root. So it's good that we have pain, because then we can figure out the root. So if you feel these things coming up, that's a good indicator that you have shame around this particular thing, whether it can, like I said, it can be anything. And basically to be compassionate with yourself, and you want to talk to someone you trust about it, like a counselor or a close friend or someone in 12-step, or even like on social media if you are close with somebody, like, hey, I really want to get this off my chest. Can I run this by you? And you want to make sure that the person who's about to receive this information, you know, you trust them to some level. You just don't want it to be anybody. And so that whole process of recognizing, externalizing, and processing, that builds vulnerability, that builds empathy, that builds emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is a skill. I mean, if you weren't brought up in a home to recognize thoughts and feelings and express them, then it's really hard as an adult. And I would know, because I was brought up in a home that you just didn't, you know, no one was taught how to express or feel or have a thought autonomously, without, you know, trying to be debated or controlled or just dismissed or invalidated or that sort of thing. So that is my Monday talk, whatever you want to call it, ayahuasca card here. And I hope you guys have a good day. I'm super tired, but I made it. So peace out, and I'll see you next time.